Welcome to Engedrian. If this is your first time listening, or even if you are returning, be sure to follow us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you are enjoying our adventure. Let's see what happens next. The journey back to Pathilius will take several days, as the only winds available to enhance the ship's arcane engines lie to the north near the ocean. Captain Fishdwain says he wants to avoid another slow movement across the desert, but assures the party there is nothing to fear near the water. Umgern suddenly remembers the large water creatures in Phila that attacked them from the river, and how nothing like them has been seen since.
Captain, where do you think those large water lizards came from that we encountered in Phila?
Malaysia happens to be nearby, smiles, and moves closer to listen. Theophania is within earshot near the back of the ship as well.
Aye, those were what scholars and wizards call dinosaurs. In Anbeth, there is a museum devoted to the fossils of ancient forms of those creatures, where you can see all types. I mean, I've never been there myself, but those river beasts were definitely of the same ilk.
The captain smiles and returns to the steering. Malaysia has a dark, curious look on his face.
But, Captain, fossils are very old bones that have been turned into stone. Archaeologists dig them up when they are excavating. Often these creatures don't even exist anymore.
Theophania walks closer to the group and sighs.
Oh, they exist now, Malaysia. You've never heard the long history of Devonmere. Only the Centaur, because of our dedication to the oral history of our people, speak the truth of Devonmere's history. It lies to the north of here, and it's my home, as you know. I won't bore you with the bloodshed, but what you should know is that before the Orc kingdoms ruled Devonmere, which were eventually deposed by Anbeth, the Orcs won back the land from a vast, marauding population of many, many dinosaurs. Yes, I know these creatures and their fossil record. The land to the far east of Devonmere is called the Lothal Peninsula, and there, untouched by any humanoid groups for at least a few thousand Isvarana, is the land of these dinosaurs, according to my people. But none have crossed the dead peaks on the eastern edge of Devonmere and returned, and some of them can probably swim.
Theophania ceases her explanation with a very sad look on her face and walks slowly away.
The pretty horse lassie is correct, of course. The waters around Lothal are just as dangerous as the land itself. That's why the shipping lane is so narrow between Lothal and the Blight on the way to the ocean. It's all rumor and story and shadow and mist now, but if you get too close, one of those lizards will get you.
Captain Fishdwain's matter-of-fact statement seems to stress Malaysia a bit.
You mean the ocean we're heading towards?
Captain Fishdwain winks at Malaysia and shakes his head.
I will be far from there, little one.
Captain Fishdwain dismisses him with a nod and returns to steering. Within an hour, and before the afternoon, the lonely lady is cruising north. Bored, Malaysia stares through Captain Fishdwain's spyglass across the horizon as the sea quickly approaches and then becomes everything they can see. The wind definitely picks up quickly as the coast is breached, and the lonely lady begins speeding across the sky towards the fingers, where the captain informs the group they would turn southwest. Malaysia loves the vastness of the sea and the deep blue of its color. There are few clouds in the sky which cause dazzling sparkles of light to shimmer across the entire surface of the water. He sighs loudly and returns to the spyglass. In the distance, he sees a few birds flying low across the water. He smiles and tries to watch them more closely. After a few minutes of losing them and finding them again, he furrows his brow. The birds are much larger than he would have expected, and they seem to be flying directly towards the ship.
Captain, can you come look at this?
Malaysia motions him over and hands him the spyglass. The captain looks where Malaysia is pointing.
Malaysia makes an insight check. Rolls 6.
Aye, mighty fine birds, little one. Well spotted.
The captain hands him back the spyglass, smiles, and returns to the steerage. Inacel smiles at the captain and walks over to Malaysia.
Find something interesting.
She accepts the spyglass from Malaysia and looks where he is pointing.
Just some birds.
Malaysia sighs and looks away.
I don't think so.
Inacel grabs Malaysia's shoulder and continues to stare through the lens. After unpacking and taking a bath, Umgern goes to the kitchen to check on the kobolds, but does not find them there. He suddenly feels very uneasy.
Umgurn uses divine sense.
Umgurn closes his eyes and reaches out all around him. He moves to the forward and back of the ship on the second level, allowing him to survey the entire vessel. He feels nothing. This alarms him more than when he felt the presence of the giant undead in the temple. He quickly rushes down to the lower storage deck.
Umgurn makes an investigation check. Advantage time. Rolls 17.
Malaysia and Inicel have mostly been dealing with cold and salted storage of items in the back of the lower ship, but Umgurn notices that the door to the far forward dry storage, which they haven't used, seems unusually clean and free of dust. There are also many footprints in the dust and cobwebs leading to the door. Some of the footprints are wide and triangular, with 3 large claw-like indentations occasionally in the floor at the head of the foot. He approaches slowly and then pulls the door open. The room is dark even at midday, and everything seems lost in shadow.
Umgurn casts dancing lights.
Umgurn pulls a bit of witchwood from his amulet, and 4 balls of light emerge in front of him, enter the room, and combine into a tight tetrahedron, casting light in the space. Umgurn gasps as he sees the kobolds, Captain Fishdwain, and his crew all broken and bleeding on the floor. Their feet are chained or roped together, preventing movement. Captain Fishdwain looks defeated and shakes his head at Umgurn, then quickly nods up. Umgurn's eyes widen and he dashes for the upper decks.
Malaysia, those are not birds, and they are headed straight for us.
Inicel screams loudly for the party to join her on deck and to position themselves at the ballistas on this side of the ship. Several are already topside and look strangely at the yelling lizard folk. Suddenly, Umgurn bursts from below deck, hears Inicel's pleas, and begins issuing orders. Captain Fishdwain, standing at the steering wheel, seems frozen and motionless with a smile on his face. Malaysia gasps and points at the approaching Umgurn.
Something's wrong with Fishdwain.
He points again. Umgurn sneers darkly.
That's not Fishdwain.
As the words die in his mouth, loud screeches and squawks bombard the party. As they charge towards the side of the ship and look out in the distance, they see 7 humanoid-sized flying creatures that look somewhat like lizards, followed by 6 huge flying lizards with wingspans that are 5 to 7 arm spans and nasty beaks, staring at them and approaching quickly.
Everyone rolls for initiative. Vodinus attacks Quetzalcoatlus C with Ballista, Sneak, Surprise, Assassinate. Rolls 17 auto crit versus AC 13 for a hit for 50 piercing damage.
Vodinus believes the cluster of oncoming creatures are an easy target for the ballista near he in case. He fires the still-pointed shaft into the bird-like beasts and strikes one of the larger ones at the back of the group, tearing through its side. The creature squawks with a horrific, bloody maul.
Pteranodon B flies into melee with Malaysia, attacks with Bite, flies away. Rolls 10 versus AC 17 for a miss.
One of the smaller beasts soars across the deck close to Malaysia and snaps at him with his jaws, snagging the shoulder of his coat but leaving him unharmed. The quick avian moves away before Malaysia can respond.
Pteranodon G flies into melee with Peace, attacks with Bite, flies away. Rolls 15 versus AC 20 for a miss.
A second of the smaller beasts swoops down straight for Peace, lashing with a bite at him, but overreaches, catching only a tuft of fur in its mouth. Peace turns to strike it as it flies away, but it is too fast and is gone.
Quetzalcoatlus B flies into melee with Umgurn, attacks with Bite, flies away. Rolls 9 versus Armor Class 19 for a miss.
One of the larger beasts folds its wings and dives towards Umgurn, chomping the air as it approaches, but only manages to close its beak on Umgurn's scimitar. It screeches and flies across the deck before Umgurn can react.
Quetzalcoatlus F flies into melee with Theophania, attacks with Bite, flies away. Rolls 9 versus AC 17 for a miss.
A second of the larger beasts flaps its wings forcibly and streaks towards Theophania's back. It drops its head low to bite her hindquarter, but she sidesteps to avoid its wing, and the beak closes on air. It flies across the deck as Theophania tries to turn to face it.
Pteranodon A flies into melee with Malaysia, attacks with Bite. Malaysia has attack of opportunity. Rolls 4 critical versus AC 17 for a miss. Rolls 8 critical versus AC 13 for a miss.
A third of the smaller creatures tries to dive like the larger one towards Malaysia with his mouth open. A sudden wind pushes it off course and it slams into the ballista, slightly stunned. Malaysia seizes upon the slightly stunned creature's misfortune and swings his short sword down hard, colliding instead with the steel shaft of the ballista, causing him to drop it.
Umgren attacks Pteranodon A with Scimitar twice. Rolls 12 and 9 versus AC 13 for misses.
Umgren tries to slice the flopping avian reptile on the deck between Malaysia and himself, but his first swing misses entirely, and his backswing brushes across the creature's thick beak with no effect.
Quetzalcoatlus G flies into melee with Peace, attacks with Bite, flies away. Rolls 9 versus Armor Class 20 for a miss.
A third of the larger beasts drops quickly towards Peace with its large beak pointed at their chest. Peace cautiously steps to the side and bends their body backward, and the creature flies past and across the deck.
Malaysia uses Flame Blade, attacks Pteranodon A, moves into melee with Pteranodon B. Rolls 16 versus AC 13 for a hit for 14 fire damage.
Malaysia, angered by dropping his sword with his hair blazing, conjures a blade of flame in his hand and immediately slices the creature's head from its shoulders. He rushes towards the other beast that nips him.
Inacel casts Summon Beast, orders it to attack Pteranodon F, wild shapes into giant spider.
Inacel murmurs a few words while gesticulating with her gilded acorn, and an eagle appears next to one of the smaller flying reptiles. She orders it to attack the creature next to her and fly into a defensive position. She then melds and morphs into a giant spider.
Inacel's Summon Beast attacks Pteranodon F with claws, moves between party and monsters. Rolls 10 versus AC 13 for a miss.
Inacel's eagle scratches at the squawking flying lizard, but only manages to grasp its wings and slide off. The eagle moves to a defensive position between the party and the monsters.
Pteranodon F flies into melee with Theophania, attacks with Bite, and flies away. Rolls 17 versus AC 17 for a hit for 7 piercing damage.
A fourth of the smaller beasts rushes towards Theophania and bites down hard on her front leg, tearing at the flesh, and then bolts away with a rush of wings. Theophania screams in pain and turns to strike it as it flies away, but she can't react fast enough.
Theophania casts Hail of Thorns, attacks Quetzalcoatlus F with Longbow twice, attacks Quetzalcoatlus G with Hordebreaker. Rolls 27 versus AC 13 for a hit for 6 piercing damage. Hail of Thorns saving throws times 3, roll 8, 2, and 18. 2 fails and 1 save for 2 piercing damage. Rolls 25 versus AC 13 for 12 piercing damage. Hordebreaker rolls 17 versus AC 13 for 6 piercing damage.
Still wincing from the pain of the bite, Theophania takes a deep breath, draws back her bow, and squeezes the handle, causing green glowing thorns to appear on the arrow. She releases the shaft and it strikes one of the larger creatures, flanked by another large and a smaller creature. The arrow explodes with magical thorns, tearing into the wings of 2 of them, but the third bats them away. She quickly notches a second arrow at the same large beast, striking it in the shoulder. She fires a third arrow at the other large flanking beast, striking it in the chest.
Peace moves into melee with Quetzalcoatlus G, attacks twice with claws, twice with Fury of Blows, 1 key point. Rolls 25, 11, 27 critical, and 15 for 5 slashing and 20 bludgeoning damage.
Having deftly avoided 2 bite attacks, Peace charges towards the largest creature closest to them, leaping onto the ballista to reach the avian in the air, and makes 2 slashing claw attacks, the first of which rakes the beast's chest. They then unleash 2 key-enhanced blows to the creature's chest, which crush the ribcage and stop the heart, causing the creature to collapse onto the deck.
Pteranodon E attacks Theophania with Bite and flies away. Rolls 21 versus AC 17 for 4 piercing damage.
One of the remaining smaller bird-like creatures rushes towards Theophania, drawn to the blood pouring from her leg, and makes a chomping bite down hard on her side. Distracted by firing her bow at the other creatures, she has no chance to react as it flies away.
Pteranodon D attacks Inacel's Summoned Eagle, flies away. Rolls 22 versus AC 13 for 7 piercing damage.
One of the smaller creatures directly in front of Inacel's eagle bolts toward it with its jaws wide, bites down on the eagle's wing, and flies over the deck away from it.
Quetzalcoatlus E attacks Theophania, flies away. Rolls 20 versus AC 17 for 11 piercing damage.
The largest beast to Theophania's left drops down from above and gnashes down on her back, tearing at her flesh. It squawks and flies some distance away.
Pteranodon C attacks Inacel's Summoned Eagle and flies away. Rolls 23 critical versus AC 13 for 8 piercing damage.
One of the smaller creatures directly in front of Inacel's eagle bolts towards it with his jaws wide, bites down on the eagle's wing, and then flies over the deck away from it.
Case uses bonus action to activate Dancing Longsword to attack Quetzalcoatlus B, attacks Quetzalcoatlus B with Spear, moves to melee with Quetzalcoatlus B, attacks with Unarmed Strike. Rolls 26 for 13 slashing damage, rolls 16 for 11 piercing damage, and rolls 17 for 13 bludgeoning damage.
Case eyes one of the larger creatures and unleashes his magical longsword, which slashes the creature's wing. Case hurls his spear, which stabs deeply into the beast's chest. He rushes towards it, leaps into the air off of a ballista, and swings a fast and powerful punch, catching the beast in the throat. It squawks loudly and collapses to the deck.
Quetzalcoatlus A flies into melee with Fodinus, attacks with Bite. Rolls 22 versus AC 17 for 11 piercing damage.
The last massive bird-like creature flies to the deck, landing in front of Fodinus and chomping down on his arm deeply.
Fodinus makes 2 short sword attacks on Quetzalcoatlus A, Sneak, flanked by Eagle. Rolls 25 for 12 piercing damage and 5 sneak attack damage, and rolls 23 for 5 piercing damage.
With the large bird in front of him, Fodinus stabs it quickly with his 2 short swords, piercing its chest twice and causing it to flap its wings and screech.
Pteranodon B attacks Malage with Bite and flies away. Rolls 10 for a miss.
The avian reptile closest to Malage smacks its jaws close to the Genasi's head and swoops down below the edge of the deck and flies back into view.
Pteranodon G attacks Theophania and flies away. Rolls 21 for a hit for 5 piercing damage.
Hidden behind the 2 large creatures engaged with Peace, one of the small creatures steers its way back to Theophania, rips at her flesh with its beak, and moves away towards the middle of the deck.
Quetzalcoatlus F attacks Peace, short distance, rolls 9 for a miss.
One of the larger creatures closest to Peace drops onto the deck and snaps their jaws at the feline, but only finds a wooden deck in its teeth.
Umgren attacks Pteranodon C with 2 scimitar attacks, rolls 23 and 25 for 15 total slashing damage.
Umgren seizes the opportunity of the avian reptile flying away from Inacel's eagle to slash it twice with his double-bladed scimitar, gashing both of its wings deeply and bringing it down to the deck, unmoving.
Malage casts Catapult, uses Metamagic to twin spell, Dex save DC 15, attacking Pteranodon D and Quetzalcoatlus A. Rolls 12 damage versus save 17 and 14 damage versus save 20.
Next to the steering apparatus are a pile of large steel cannonballs. Malage undulates his hands in an arcane motion and twists his fingers in a sculpting pattern, and 2 of the steel balls fly in opposite directions at one of the large and one of the smaller creatures. Both creatures squawk and flap their wings, pushing themselves out of the path, and the balls go flying over the edge of the ship.
Inacel uses Web Attack on Quetzalcoatlus E, moves into melee with Quetzalcoatlus A, rolls 20. Quetzalcoatlus E is restrained.
Inacel, still in giant spider form, launches a web at one of the large creatures near Peace and ensnares it in sticky fibers, collapsing its wings and causing it to drop to the deck. She then moves close to the creature attacking Fodinus. As she is wild-shaped, she cannot give a verbal command to her eagle, so it continues to defend its position.
Inacel's eagle holds action in position. Pteranodon F attacks Case with Bite, flies into melee with Malage, rolls 23 critical for 15 piercing damage.
One of the avian reptiles that bit Theophania makes a pass by Fodinus and bites deeply into his arm. The creature screeches and flies away towards Malage.
Theophania attacks Quetzalcoatlus F with longbow twice, rolls 10 and 12, both misses.
Theophania notches one arrow after another to make 2 quick longbow shots at the large, unrestrained beast next to Peace, but both arrows fly wide and over the side of the ship.
Peace attacks Quetzalcoatlus F twice with claws and twice with flurry of blows, 1 key point. Rolls 10, 10, 19, and 13 for 15 total bludgeoning damage.
Peace, surrounded by 2 of the larger creatures, chooses the unrestrained threat and makes 2 slashing claw attacks which are deflected by the beast's wing. They then unleash 2 key-enhanced blows to the creature's neck, which make a loud cracking sound, and it collapses.
Pteranodon E attacks Umgren with Bite and flies away. Rolls 10 versus AC 19 for a miss.
One of the smaller, bird-like creatures that harmed Theophania swoops past Umgren to bite him, but misses and streaks towards Malage.
Pteranodon D attacks Theophania and flies away. Rolls 7 versus AC 17 for a miss. Inacel's eagle attacks Pteranodon D with claws, rolls 5 for a miss.
The beast that attacked the eagle darts back towards Theophania with its jaws wide and snaps them on air, and then continues its path to Inacel's eagle. The eagle reacts with a claw attack that also finds only air.
Quetzalcoatlus E makes a strength check, DC 12, rolls 5, remains restrained.
The large avian reptile, covered in Inacel's web, shudders its wings and yelps but remains captured by the sticky webs.
Case hurls a spear at Pteranodon G, moves into melee and makes an unarmed attack, moves longsword into melee with Pteranodon G and attacks. Rolls 26 for 8 piercing damage, and rolls 10 for a miss, rolls 11 for a miss.
Case's spear returns to his hand and he hurls it at the closest small creature, striking it in the chest. He rushes forward to follow that with a punch, but the lofty avian reptile dodges. He commands his longsword to attack the beast, but the winged menace dodges that strike as well.
Quetzalcoatlus A attacks Inacel, rolls 18 versus Spider AC 14 for 11 piercing damage.
The large, bird-like beast between Fodinus and Inacel lashes out at the spider form with its vicious bite, sinking its teeth into the furry arachnid's back.
Fodinus attacks Quetzalcoatlus A with short sword, attacks Pteranodon D with short sword sneak. Rolls 15 versus AC 13 for 8 piercing damage, rolls 20 versus AC 13 for 8 piercing damage, and 18 sneak attack damage.
Fodinus stabs the large beast closest to him directly through the heart with his short sword, and it falls. He rushes to the smaller creature next to Inacel and pierces it through the belly, dropping it to the deck as well.
Pteranodon B attacks Umgren with bite, rolls 16 versus AC 19 for a miss.
The furthest creature behind Malaysia flies past him and swoops down to gnash its jaws on Umgerd, but only finds the drow's scimitar blade in its teeth. It flies past him towards Case.
Pteranodon G attacks Case with bite, flies away, rolls 13 for a miss.
The winged menace Case didn't seem to hit snaps its teeth at him quickly and then flaps its wings and moves off the deck.
Umgren moves into melee with Pteranodon B, makes 2 scimitar attacks, rolls 21 and 15 for 13 total slashing damage.
Umgren rushes quickly towards the flying creature that just tried to attack him and quickly slices it twice with his scimitar blade, shattering its spine and dropping it to the deck.
Malaysia uses Burning Hands, Dex saving throw DC 15, rolls 11 fire damage. Pteranodon E and F saving throws of 19 and 13, 1 fail and 1 save.
With 2 of the avian reptiles in front of him, Malaysia places his hands together and a burst of fire erupts from them, engulfing the creatures. Both of them squawk and burn, but remain aloft.
Inacel moves into melee with Quetzalcoatlus E, bonus action returns to her normal form, attacks with Crystal Scimitar, verbally commands Eagle to attack Pteranodon G, rolls 19, advantage restrained, for 9 slashing damage. Inacel's Eagle moves into melee with Pteranodon G and attacks, rolls 14 versus AC 13 for 13 piercing damage.
Inacel rushes across the deck towards the large, restrained creature, morphing back into her normal form as she does. She brings her crystal scimitar down hard on the beast, slicing deeply into its wing and side. She shouts to her summoned eagle to attack the smaller creature just off the deck. The eagle streaks towards it, claws extended, and shreds the avian reptile's throat. It falls helplessly out of sight off the ship.
Pteranodon F attacks Malaysia with bite, flies into melee with Case, rolls 20 for 5 piercing damage.
The charred beast in front of Malaysia snaps at him, tearing at his flesh on his arm, and then flaps his wings and flies back across the deck towards Case.
Theophania uses Hunter's Mark, attacks Quetzalcoatlus E with longbow twice, advantage, rolls 27 and 20 for 12 piercing damage and 6 Hunter's Mark damage.
Theophania squeezes her bow, and a reddish hue appears over the large, restrained creature's head. She launches 2 arrows in quick succession, striking the helpless beast in the chest.
Peace attacks Quetzalcoatlus E with claws, moves into melee with Pteranodon F, attacks with claws, moves with feline agility to melee with Pteranodon E, attacks with fury of blows, rolls 19 for 9 slashing damage, rolls 23 for 10 slashing damage, rolls 15 and 19 for 16 total bludgeoning damage.
Peace, as if possessed by the immortal spirit of their family's key, slashes the large restrained creature, tearing out its throat. They bolt to the smaller creature in combat with Case and slash its neck, spraying the deck with blood. They screech with feline vigor and rush to the last smaller beast near Malaysia and throw 2 punches, again crushing its ribcage and stopping its heart. As the smaller beast collapses, the other 2 beasts also collapse and the battle is finished.
Each party member receives 600 experience points.
Umgern immediately moves to the Captain Fishdwain in posture with his scimitar drawn and places the blade against his neck. The rest of the party, bleeding and in pain, do not protest but move slowly closer. Umgern presses the blade of his scimitar against the captain's neck. He suddenly swings it and the blade passes through the illusion. He waves his hand and the illusion vanishes.
The captain and crew are all below deck, severely injured in the dry storage. Quickly, let's free them and tend to any wounds. Inacel, Theophania, please take care of these beasts.
Fodinus, Malaysia, Case, and Peace vanish below deck. Inacel and Theophania begin inspecting the flying lizards' corpses.
Inacel makes a nature check, advantage, assisted by Theophania, rolls 24 critical.
My limited knowledge of these dinosaurs being what it is, I believe these smaller creatures are called pteranodons, and the larger are called Quetzalcoatlus.
Inacel nods at Theophania's assessment and inspects the creatures.
The long beaks of these creatures would be excellent for making weapons, as they are naturally very strong and powerful spear tips. The wings of the smaller creatures will make very fine leather for non-armor uses, but the wings of these larger beasts are thick enough for leather armor.
These beasts are also quite tasty, so I've heard. Case will be very happy.
By the time Inacel and Theophania have completed their assessment and begun to harvest the beaks and wings, the rest of the party emerges from below with the captain, his crew, and the kobolds. Philby and Thessaline are not with them, and there are only 5 kobolds, including Circa, but not Gotro. Malaysia has tears of fire falling from his face, and Peace and Case seem somewhat distraught. Fodinus and Umgurn have solemn looks on their faces. Inacel motions with a smile for Case and Fodinus to join them, and they begin harvesting the meat, but then drops her expression and runs over to the injured crew who are settling on the deck.
I have healed them as best as I can, as has Malaysia in Inacel. Please do your best. The others didn't make it.
Umgurn turns away and joins Theophania. Case and Fodinus walk solemnly away from the injured crew to assist Theophania.
Theophania receives 6 pteranodon beaks, 5 Quetzalcoatlus beaks, 6 pairs of pteranodon wings, and 5 pairs of Quetzalcoatlus wings, 60 pieces of pteranodon meat, 240 pounds, and 305 pieces of Quetzalcoatlus meat, 1,220 pounds. Inacel uses 9 potions of healing, 4 healer's kits, and casts Healing Word 7 times. The captain and 7 crew are restored to full health.
Thank you, milady Zelani. We are most appreciative.
Captain Fishdwain, though now healed and no longer bleeding, is missing his right hand and his left eye. Seraphine is missing her right lower leg. The kobolds are missing a few hands and a few eyes and 1 lower leg. Inacel's magic has already caused the flesh to close, but they seem broken and exhausted.
What has happened to you, my dear friends? We will not trouble you to tell us until you have a good rest. Let's get you below. Malaysia, you are cooking dinner.
The party helps the recovered crew back down below deck to their quarters. Peace makes tea for everyone, in which they place a special tincture from Inacel for rest. Malaysia cooks 25 pounds of Quetzalcoatlus meat, which has a soothing and meaty aroma and lifts everyone's spirits tremendously. The recovered crew and kobolds eat hungrily without much talk and return to their beds to sleep.
In the morning, I will outfit all of them with replacement limbs.
Malaysia seems matter-of-fact in his pronouncement, as if it were obvious and simple. The others smile and nod. There is little conversation and only solemn drinking of ale. Everyone retires early for a hearty rest.
The party takes a long rest.
Inacel and Malaysia are up very early the following morning. Inacel moves all of the bodies from the dry storage cargo hold where they had died to the deck, wraps each in oilcloth along with flowers, herbs, and shiny stones, and securely ties the bundles with rope. By the time she finishes with her crew, Fodinus and Case arrive and help her similarly prepare the avian reptiles. Before closing the oilcloth, Inacel collects a claw from all 11 creatures to add to her net to honor them, as well as to remind her of the loss of her crew. The 3 of them stack the reptiles to the side. Before Inacel got to the reptiles, Malaysia had harvested many bones from the beast and was boiling them in a large pot on the foredeck. He has gathered from the stores the iron nails, a few of the fire newt chainmail, some kobold leather armor, the 2 fake eyes made of blue quartz and malachite, 2 gemstalker claws, 1 of the animated armor fragments, 2 of the Ankeg chitons, an iron spike, and a large dragon's tooth. He removes a handful of his magical tools from his bag and makes a few different items he needs to work with the raw materials.
Malaysia makes 7 Tinker Tools check, advantage time, DC 20. Rolls 25, 24, 13, 15, 25, 24, and 22. 5 successes and 2 failures.
After several hours, by which time all of the crew, kobolds, and party are on the deck, Malaysia has created prostheses for each of them. Captain Fishtwain now has a blue quartz eye and a deadly-looking dragon tooth and iron hook on his hand. Seraphine has a solid new leg with a metal base and a leather adornment. 3 of the kobolds have new hooked or gemmed clawed or weaponed hands or sturdy lower limbs. Serko has a shiny malachite eye. One of the kobolds lost his arm midway through the upper bone, and the replacement Malaysia makes does not fit well and isn't functional. A second kobold leg was lost mid-thigh, and similarly, with the materials available, the replacement is quite heavy and hard to maneuver. However, on all of their faces are looks of joy, thanks, and pride in the little Genasi's thoughtful attempts to make them feel whole again.
Mumgern, we are back over land and heading in the correct direction. Would it be possible to land for an hour or two to bury the bodies?
Inicel stands next to Umgern, who is steering the ship, with Captain Fishtwain standing next to him. The captain nods quickly. Umgern smiles and begins manipulating the controls to drop the lonely lady from the sky towards the ground. After less than an hour, the ship is hovering a ladder's length from the ground.
Where are we?
Malaysia stands on the deck with the crew and kobolds, who are still a bit awkward with their new limbs.
There is a long stretch of land north of Hespa that extends out into the ocean. That is the land below us, little one.
The captain stares out at the water with his good eye resting his hook on the railing. He looks down at Malaysia and then back and forth with his good eye at the new hook hand. His face brightens and he smiles and laughs loudly.
Inicel casts Mold Earth repeatedly.
On the ground, Inicel is magically moving the loose sand and dirt to create individual graves for each of the crew and kobolds. She creates a large, single hole for the flying reptiles. Fodinas and Case search the land around them, while Theophania stands guard with an arrow notched. Peace has removed all of their clothing and gear and is swimming in the ocean, diving deeply for what seems like minutes, and then resurfacing with the variety of items they place on the shore.
Fodinas and Case make investigation and perception checks. Roll 9 and 4, and 12 and 1.
Other than the sandy shores, the deep blue ocean, and the connecting waves, Fodinas and Case do not see anything of interest or notice anything out of the ordinary.
Peace makes a survival check. Advantage time. Rolls 19.
After nearly half an hour, Peace has collected 10 large closed shells, 3 large spiral shells, a few starfish, and about 24 pieces of bright, shiny stone, some of which is translucent. They turn and move back into the water, diving into the depths right offshore. After a few moments, Peace's head appears above the water and issues a loud, almost frantic hiss. Fodinas, Case, Inicel, and Theophania turn towards the noise and see the naked feline with large tentacles surrounding them in the water.
Everyone rolls for initiative. Peace makes 2 claw attacks and Fury of Blows 1 key point. Rolls 24, 23, 8, and 12 for 13 slashing damage and 7 bludgeoning damage.
Treading water adeptly, Peace slashes at the tentacles and bulbous head of the octopus, moving towards them, cutting 2 of the tentacles deeply and landing 1 punch to the beast's face.
Case throws his spear, activates his dancing longsword, and enters melee for an unarmed punch. Rolls 16 versus AC 11 for 8 piercing damage, rolls 14 for 9 slashing damage, and rolls 18 for 11 bludgeoning damage.
Case, with a look of terror on his face, hurls his spear at the multi-armed mollusk, striking it in the head. He tosses his longsword into the air and it streaks towards the octopus and hacks off a tentacle. Case splashes through the water next to Peace and punches the creature in the head again. Peace looks directly at Case with a bit of disdain and disappointment.
Theophania attacks a giant octopus with 2 longbow attacks. Rolls 15 and 12 for 15 total piercing damage.
Theophania, arrow already notched, releases 2 quick shots one after the other, which take the octopus in its eye. Ink begins to spill into the water around it and its tentacles collapse. Case roars loudly, grabs the shaft of the 2 arrows sticking from the beast, and hoists it into the air with one hand. He picks up Peace by the scruff of their neck with the other and walks out of the water.
Theophania, Case, and Peace receive 75 experience points each.
The tabaxi dries themselves on the sand, laying motionless and flat on their stomach. Peace eventually gets up, redresses, packs their sea loot into their bag, and returns to the ship. The entire time, Case stood facing the water, spear and sword in hand, watching the waves with the octopus at his feet. Inicel completes her burial ritual, and just before she moves the sand over the flying reptiles, Case tosses the octopus inside and hands Theophania her arrows. He walks silently back to the ladder and boards the ship. Inicel adds a few flowers, herbs, and stones for the cephalopod and then covers the pit. By the time they return, Case and Peace, standing off to one side, appear to have completed a heated discussion as Case storms off from Tabaxi and down below the deck in a huff. Strangely, Peace is smiling. Malaysia moves closer to Peace.
So, what did you find besides the octopus?
Peace laughs and begins pulling their bounty from their bag. They lay out 10 large closed shells, 3 large spiral shells, a few starfish, and about 24 pieces of bright, shiny stone, some of which is translucent. Fodinas and one of the kobolds make their way over to Peace, the kobold carrying a bucket of cold seawater. Fodinas picks up the closed shells one at a time and opens them with his dagger.
Fodinas makes 10 D100 checks to find pearls, DC 90. On finding a pearl, roll a D10. 1 through 9 is a pearl, 10 is a black pearl. Rolls 45, 12, 65, 76, 84, 54, 19, 70, 98, and 45. 1 success. Rolls 1 100 gold piece pearl. Fodinas receives a 100 gold piece pearl.
Once checked for the precious pearls, Fodinas drops the huge mollusk meat into the bucket. Peace takes each of the spiral shells and makes a small hole in the back with Fodinas' dagger and then blows air into it. The mollusk inside slides easily out and into the bucket of seawater. They add the starfish to the bucket, and the kobold smiles and walks away to prepare a meal. Peace gathers the 20 shiny ocean stones and takes them to Inicel to add to her collection for ritual purposes. She thanks Peace and gives the Tabaxi a hug.
Case seems very mad at you right now. I think because he thought he was going to lose you.
Inicel frowns at the feline. Peace laughs.
No, he is not. Inicel, back home in our land, we used to dive for shellfish all the time. We are amazing swimmers, and hunting ashtanaba, or octopus as you call them, with our bare hands is part of our customs. In fact, we must not harm it too much, or the meat is no good. When we emerged from the water, we were excited because the octopus would make an excellent dinner. But Case stabbed it with his spear, ruining the meat. He is mad because he cut himself out of an excellent dinner. We tried to reassure him. And yes, he was initially mostly concerned about our safety, but now he is disappointed in himself. Did you see him waiting by the sea while we dried off? He was hoping to catch another octopus.
Inicel bursts out laughing, as does Peace. With all of the crew returned and the winds aligned, the rest of the journey to Pathilia goes smoothly with no issues. After several days and coinciding with the morning that Pathilia came into view, Captain Fishdwain asks everyone to join him and the crew for lunch on the deck. Once gathered and after completing lunch, the captain sits back in his seat and sighs.
Aye, again we are grateful for you. Although we lost our friends and colleagues, we are still alive. As to what happened, after you departed that morning to return to the volcano, we took to the air and decided to make a slow circle around Sane to observe the volcano and make notes about anything else that might be of interest in the vicinity. The kobolds were on the deck practicing their swordplay, and my crew were watching the rigging and helping me maintain a steady course. Then suddenly, there it was on the deck, as if it appeared from thin air. It looked like a person at first, and then when I moved closer, I assumed it was a dragonborn or a lizard folk. But it wasn't. It was something else. It didn't speak, but simply started attacking us. It moved so quickly, no one had time to react. It carried 2 long swords and wore bracers on each arm, but otherwise only wore a loincloth of leather adorned with teeth. If it wasn't hacking at us with its long swords, it was throwing what looked like razor-sharp teeth from the bracers at us, 2 at a time. When it was close to one of us, after it swung those swords, it would try and bite you. As you saw, its bite was pretty destructive, along with the swords and teeth. Once we were all dead or bleeding, it gathered us up 2 or 3 at a time and carried us below to the hold. It never hesitated. It was like it knew the ship inside and out. It threw us all in there. It did say a few words, which were not draconic,
Captain Fishtwain makes a performance check, DC 12, and Malaysia makes an intelligence check, DC 15. Roll 3 and 12.
Aye, it said something like, Ni wo ni doanel wortha thien moand dolorna.
Malaysia listens carefully to the words, but has no idea what language it might be. The captain continues his story.
Aye, we did our best to tend to everyone's wounds. Sister Milligan was below when it appeared, and must have hidden. She made her way to us and tried to heal us, but the best she could do was to stem the bleeding and couldn't save any of the dead. She was so angry. She ran up to the deck to face the creature, but we never heard from her after that. And then I passed out until ye found us.
Umgern stares solemnly at the captain. Inicel stands close to Theophania, hugging her gently and sobbing. Malaysia has his face buried in Fodinas' stomach, sobbing. Peace stands in front of Case's hands on their shoulders, both looking calm but angry. Umgern suddenly looks up and around, then back at the captain.
Before the dinosaur attack, I tried to sense evil all across the ship, but I felt nothing, which is strange. Did it ever use magic?
Umgern folds his hands together tightly.
I don't rightly know. It moved so fast.
The captain blushes.
Umgern, if it appeared out of nowhere, similarly disappeared, and was steering with a very convincing illusion towards those creatures that seemed compelled to attack us from a long distance, it must have been using magic.
Malaysia is wide-eyed and looking all around the ship as well. Umgern nods.
But it has attacked us with all it thought it needed to dispense with us. When its minions do not return to it, wherever it came from, it will likely try again. But I think we are safe within these borders.
As Umgern's words fade on the ears of the ship's passengers, the towers of Pathilia are clearly visible, and the airfield in the distance is beginning to show. When they land at the airfield, the party is met by their wagon and horses led by Gelder and Sina. Captain Fishtwain's crew are met by a troop of soldiers and clerics who take them and the kobolds to Pathilia for additional care. One of the soldiers approaches the party before they depart.
Hail, Umgern, righteous protector of Pathilia. I am commanded by my king to assist you in emptying your holds and distributing any of the goods as needed. I am oath-sworn to King Kalia with my life.
At that, he holds up his right hand, and the party can see a dark-lined tattoo of a brightly shining Isvara on the back of it. Umgern nods and bows deeply, as does Theophania. The rest of the party look confused, but also bow slightly.
If he is willing, I would leave our young Friar Genasi in your company to go through the cargo with you in detail. He is quite brilliant, and it should only take a short while. Then we will be on our way. Malaysia, we will wait for you and have lunch with Gelder and Sina. Is that okay?
Umgern smiles knowingly, and Malaysia giddily jumps down from the carriage and races towards the soldier. He grabs his hand and nearly drags him to the ship, his hair afire and glowing the whole way. A short time later, the party sits on a grassy hill overlooking the landing field with a fresh picnic provided by the king's soldiers. Case is snoring, having devoured half the food, and Peace sits next to him reading poetry and watching butterflies land on his face. Theophania is settled down on her legs. Inicel leans against her, staring at Isvara. Fodinas sits on top of the carriage, looking out across the vast plain to the looming mountains beyond. Umgern sighs and looks at Gelder and Sina.
What news is there from Pathilia in our short absence?
Gelder's face flushes a bit red, and Sina frowns. Umgern frowns and leans towards them.
The city of Pathilia is in a bit of a panic at the moment, Umgern. Although the king kept the mission of the ships to the southeast a secret, it is hard to contain. The city murmurs about invaders from Saturnalfus, even though the king has assured them repeatedly that the threat is gone. But a group of orcs, hobgoblins, and kobolds, all citizens of Oldestal, were kidnapped and barely escaped with their lives. They were being secreted away through the east Mornwood, and a group of forest-dwelling kobolds rescued them and freed them.
At those words, Theophania and Inicel perk up and begin listening intently. Gelder continues his story.
The kidnapped fellows traveled together to Woodshead, and the local constable reported it to the king. But a group like that in a small town like Woodshead, more rumors spread, tainted with kidnap and eventually Centernal Foos.
Inesel clears her throat, and Gelder looks at her with a faint smile.
Were the forest-dwelling kobolds, as you called them, with the kidnapped fellows?
Gelder's face drops again with a very deep blush.
No, my lady Zelani. The kobolds died helping them escape. But the kidnapped fellows mentioned you and my lady Theophania to the constable. That's why he took them in. They have returned safely to Oldestall by now.
Theophania pats Inesel's shoulder gently, knowing the druid is deeply saddened by her friends who likely didn't receive a proper burial, or worse, were eaten by some vile fiends. Fodinas drops down to the ground and squats next to Gelder.
Umgern, it is time this mystery was solved. Are these kidnappings and disappearances of Oldestall citizens part of the plan of Centernalfus to recruit more slaves, or is it the work of Varkador? Traveling through the East Monwood seems to indicate Centernalfus, but we have no idea where Varkador is.
He stabs the dirt deeply with his dagger, and the blade goes very black.
Perhaps it's best, Fodinas, if you and Case take Malage to the, scholars at the monastery on your way back to the manor house.
Fodinas nods. Though no one noticed the process, Peace moves next to Inesel and places 4 crowns of flowers at her feet, one for each of her lost kobolds. The lizardfolk smiles at the tabaxi. She pulls herbs from her bag and entwines them with the crowns. She removes 4 shiny stones from her bag. Then, with the crowns in one hand and the stones in the other, she stands in front of Gelder's small campfire and throws them in, one at a time, with a stone.
It is not enough, but it will have to do.
Malage and the oath-sworn soldier, whose name is Darvin, move through the hold of the ship at a constant pace. Malage either pulls an item from its location and places it in the middle of the hold, or leaves it where it is in storage. Any items he's left in place, he explains briefly what they are. For the items he pulls, he decides to give the magical quarterstaff to Circo and asks Darvin to see that the kobold receives it. In addition to their standard gear, he keeps for the party the iron bands of Bolaro, the bag of beans, the crystal ball, a silver magnifying glass, a steel mirror, a watertight scroll case, a set of 12 runestones made of obsidian, the compass, the huge pale blue sapphire, the small glass sphere, and the fire giant toenails. The rest of the items he entrusts to Darvin to transport to the city to be sold to various vendors at 25% or more of their retail value, or to be gifted to the king's library for further study, including all of the books and the Wand of Wonder, for which the king will reward the party per his usual kindness. He also gives Darvin a piece of parchment for Hadrian to ask if it is possible to produce a cloak of displacement, magical whip, skull of revelation, or circuit of blasting, canteen of last resort, or alchemy jug, from the Cloaker Cloak, Cloaker Tail, Flame Skull's skull, or Ankeg's stomachs, respectively. Darvin seems perfectly happy with this request and assures Malage it will be done. Malage joins the others in the carriage, and they make the quick journey back towards Pathilia and to the manor house. On the journey, Fodinas gathers all coins from everyone, counts them meticulously, and then divides them equally among the party, along with the contribution to their 7 surviving friends. At the manor house, the party goes about unpacking and sorting their gear, Malage, Peace, and Inesel, immediately eating food, Case, taking a long, quiet walk, Umgern, visiting with Gelder, Sina, and the horses, Theophania, or falling immediately asleep in their clothes, Fodinas. Thank you for visiting Engedrian. Don't forget to find us on Facebook, X, formerly Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube for additional content, battle maps, and background details. We hope you're enjoying our adventure. We can't wait to hear what happens next.